Hey, what's up, YouTube? I have a problem. The four-wheeler that I built, in my opinion, was a fail. If I geared it to do much over 30 or 35 miles an hour, it would burn belts up. It just had too great of a power loss through that gearbox, and a 30 series torque converter I'm overpowering for the weight that's there. Like, my motors don't burn the belts up on my go-kart because there's two of them and there's a lot less weight for how much the motor's pushing. So they didn't burn belts up. I put it on my four-wheeler, it burns belts up because there's only one engine and it's pretty heavy. It's got big tires on it. So I have a GX340, which is an 11 horse. It's a cheap knockoff one, but I've had it laying around. It works. I gotta buy a crankshaft for it. I got a 40 series torque converter. That's gonna go on my four-wheeler with that reverse gearbox. I'm going to leave it pretty much stock because them gearboxes, you're not really supposed to put much above 11 horsepower to them. That's what that is. I think it'll be alright. The Predator engine that I had probably had way over 15 horsepower, but this motor's bigger and it's going to have a lot more torque. So it's going to work out a lot better on that. Okay, so I bought another four-wheeler and took it out. Had some issues where I couldn't start it out on the trail. My buddy doubled me back on his little tiny four-wheeler, and we picked mine up. So I go to pull my new four-wheeler back with the four-wheeler that I made with the Predator on it, and I'm pulling it up a hill, and all of a sudden sparks fly out of the exhaust and it just quit running. Turns out I dropped a valve. I use stock retainers with, a pretty decent valve spring. I'm going to set that up differently. Luckily, the only thing that happened is this valve bent, the spring shattered, and I got a few little nicks in my piston, which they're fine, they're not going to hurt anything, and my combustion chamber. My valve seams weren't hurt, or my valve guides weren't hurt. So that's all reusable. It's going to be cheap to put it back together. Lesson learned. I tried to save a few bucks. Not a good idea. But, so that motor's off there and took apart. Well, I'm waiting on parts for that four-wheeler and my other four-wheeler and my Jeep right now. So I can't do anything with them. This pit bike right here has been sitting around for a while. It's a nice pit bike. It's an SDG 110. They don't make parts for the engine anymore. It's not worth rebuilding the engine that was on it. The piston rings are worn out. The clutch is worn out. I couldn't even get gaskets for it. I'm sure I could make a gasket, but I'd have to get everything else too to go along with it. It's at the point where it would cost more money than it's worth to rebuild it. So instead of buying another pit bike engine, I have that Predator laying around off my four-wheeler. And that, if you've ever seen a Predator engine on a mini bike or something small, they're kind of scary, especially when they're built. I've seen a stock Predator engine on a dirt bike. There's another guy that's got a YouTube channel, and it worked out pretty good. That's a pretty fast dirt bike. So this thing barely weighs anything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the Predator engine on this, and the little thing should fly. So what we're going to do is I'm going to cut some of this stuff away, some of the old motor mounts, to get them out of the way, to get the engine tucked up in the frame, and we're going to put a Predator engine on this. Alright, here, so I've got to looking at this thing. There's a few things that I'm going to save on here, and there's a few things that I know I'm not going to use. There's little plastics that go on this gas tank that are going to get put back on there. This coil, I don't need this key. The brake's going to stay where it is. I have the foot pegs. These are the foot pegs that came off of it. They just bolted to the bottom of the engine. Something like that. They bolted to the bottom of the engine right there. I'm going to reuse them. They'll probably go on the bottom of my motor mount. So what I've done here, this isn't the engine I'm using. That engine has the head off right now and is currently taken apart. Normally I would cut this off with the cutoff wheel, but I'm currently out of cutoff wheels. So I'm going to have to cut it with a Sawzall and grind the rest of this back to where it's gone. I got this motor sitting here, and it fits. It has plenty of ground clearance at this point. But the issue is the sprocket here. You want this sprocket as close to this as possible, and you want it in line with it in your chain. I don't want it down here. If you was to draw a line, take a piece of string and run it straight through the center, because you want to try to get that in line with it. Alright, so what I've done here is I put these bars in here. I need to cut this section out so my valve cover can go up more in this area and help my sprocket off my torque converter line up. Before I cut this pipe, I cut right here and I notched it so this tube right here would sit in it. I did that on both sides, put them in and tacked them in there, made these, tacked them in there, and I welded it all up completely. Now I can cut this out and this will stay how it was. Nothing actually moved. The shock mount will be the same and everything. I've cut almost all the way through this. I'm at the last little bit here. Okay, I moved my swing arm down, the pivot point of it, and I kept the exact same ride height on the seat. That's why I strapped it, and I moved the pivot point 2 inches down, and what that's done is it's made it so it's possible to get my jack shaft in line with the pivot point of the swing arm and the axle, and that way my suspension doesn't have that much effect on my chain. Alright, so what I've done here is I got these 2 pieces of angle iron. I tacked this one on here. I drilled holes through it and this big plate. It's like a 1/2 inch plate I welded on the frame, and I tapped it with a 7/16 14 bolt. And then I cut the welds off, took this off and drilled it out to a 7/16 hole. And now that's bolted on there. This one I tack welded on there. I drilled the holes, tapped them. Now I have to cut this off and drill these holes on the angle iron. That way it doesn't have threads in the hole anymore. What that will do is that will make it so my frame will be removable. The motor, everything. You take these 4 bolts out and take out the 2 uppers, and the motor will come right off. These are going to be a lot easier to get to than the motor mount bolts. Alright, I got my removable motor mount all tacked together here. I got pieces of angle iron that I've drilled 2 holes in and bolted to it. They're loose right now. I need to tack weld it here and here. There's also one right up underneath here for the back engine mount that I need to tack. Then come back here. That's tacked to that angle iron. And then I have 2 angle pieces. It's gonna be hard to see back here, but I have angle pieces going down off of there to strengthen it, and then 2 bars running underneath the engine and them angle irons. Now I'm gonna try to weld as much of this together as I can while the engine's bolted on, so it doesn't change and deform. The engine will kind of hold everything where it needs to be. If I have a little bit of welding left after I take it off, it's no big deal. Alright, I got my motor all mounted up here. The whole motor mount is done and welded up. Now, what I need to do is make an exhaust. This is a header off my go-kart. That would go on there and it would work. I don't know if it'd be in the way of the plastics or anything. I'm not too worried about that. What I've done, traced around that flange to make that piece. Okay, I've also marked 2 holes here. So I'm going to go ahead and drill these holes. I'm going to drill one in the center that's kind of big, but it's not quite as big as the port. Then I could stick this up on the engine and port match it to the cylinder head, and then I could make my header off of that. Now I have this locked down in here really good. What I'm going to do is try to center punch these holes as straight as possible, or as much in the center as possible. Okay, that looks pretty center on that one. Now for the same thing here. Now, I'm going to slowly step up with these sizes. If you drill straight to the size you need, it's hard on your bits. It will wear your bits out. If you oil your bits, take your time and start small and slowly step up to the size that you need. You will not wear your bits out, at least as fast. Now we have a flange that slides on here. So now what we need to do is drill a hole in the center of this and then match it to our port the best we can. I'm going to come in with this step bit and drill it to a bigger size hole. And we'll put it back up there. We don't want to go bigger than the port. It's going to go just under is what we want. Now, I'm pretty sure that none of that is going to be outside of where my actual port is. Now, I know that this hole should not be bigger than that port, but I'm going to stick it up here and double check anyways. And I'm glad I did, because I do not want to go much more that way. If anything, I want to go every direction but that. Alright guys, I got my exhaust made. I got to get 2 Allen head bolts to be able to bolt it on. And then I'm going to make a lower mount for it too, just so it doesn't come loose so easy. I've mounted my foot pegs. My engine mount's completely done. My brake actually works, but just one of the master cylinder bolts are in. I got to weld a nut or a piece of metal that's drilled and tapped. That way I have another hole for the other master cylinder bolt so I can bolt it on. I just got my throttle and throttle cable. I need to put a chain on here, hook up a kill switch, hook up the fuel line, bolt everything together, and I need to buy either an intake valve and valve springs, or I need to buy another head and valve springs. I'm not sure which route I'm going to go, but we will take care of all that in the next episode and get to ride this thing. It's going to be a quick little project. It should really fly. I've had many bikes with 6.5 horse engines. Just putting the torque converter on them makes them kind of scary. So this, with it built and the torque converter on it, it being so light, this little thing ought to fly. I think it should beat a regular pit bike. But anyways, I appreciate you guys watching. Please like, subscribe, share this with your friends. Hit the bell so you know when my next video comes out. I appreciate you guys watching. Have a good one.